Ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Balava Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. I would have continued chanting, but I know my voice would be shot, so I didn't try. But we can maybe have a nice kirtan at the end. Quick. Oh. Oh. Ooh. Do you have a way to identify which cars they are? In case somebody didn't notice the fire hydrant and their car won't be there when they come back? But somebody should look and see which cars. Any takers for a free car tow? All right. You know what to do if you go out there and your car isn't there. Go to the police station. Somewhere in the course of the journey from Portland, which is much warmer than Chicago, by the way, to here, I was informed that, at least for the Sunday program, the Naperville Temple has been focusing on Bhagavad Gita, following Gita Jayanti, but still on a roll. So, Bhagavad Gita. And I just came across a document that I didn't even know I had. How the history of Gita values. Does anyone here know the history? Here's the history. It's different. I've been saying not really the right version. Mary Rowe. Anybody know who Mary Rowe is? She's a nice lady. She's the conflict mediation and resolution person at MIT. And she was invited to Potomac by her good friend Brian Block, or Rajabihari, because he studied under her in conflict mediation and resolution. So, long story short, there was a group of senior devotees giving responses to someone who was Shesha Prabhu, who was going to be taking up a role of, she says, CEO, the chairman of the GBC. And, like, how to do it. What are the guiding principles? And it was a 2-day discussion with a lot of people. She wrote it up afterwards. And interestingly, this is like just anecdotal information, but she was doing her thing, being the role of, okay, it's not a conflict, but it's like, okay, step back. And what I heard, because she's new, she doesn't know all about ISKCON, she knows something. Here, what I'm hearing is, and she's summarized what she's hearing, because she had said nothing up to that point, and right behind her was Braj Bihari's son, Gopinath, who stood up and said, that's Gita values. And then it became Gita values. And so it got distilled down to, and without some back and forth with Shonaka Rishi and what's going on? Shonaka Rishi has some connection, I don't know exactly what, with Oxford University. There are some devotee... Come on. There are some devotee professors, or professors who are devotees at Oxford University, and some collaboration, they came up with Gita values. I got a much shorter version, but that's the background of Gita values, in case you wanted to know. And then they identified 6 that were like guiding principles how to live your life by. If you're going to be the chairman of the GBC, or you're going to be a member of the Hare Krishna movement, or anything in between. Values to live by. And there were 6 in number, not that there's only 6, but there were 6 in number that got repeated several times. And then, nice little paragraph. And Amrita Kelly, you can confirm that you received those 6, right? Okay. So you'll find in your inbox somewhere, however you send communications, those 6 items, and then a little paragraph, nicely worded paragraph that summarizes what those 6 Gita values are. So that's the background. And a little bit of a repeat, because the same first 3 slides were from the midday discussion. Spiritual culture and its values. I just spent some time in Portland with a 16-part seminar on Light of the Bhagavad, which there's lots of ways describing what it is, but it's a summarization in highlight overview form of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, including even some little section on cosmology. But it's Canto 10, Chapter 20, which is the rainy and the autumn season in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada extracted scenes of nature in the rainy season, then the autumn season, and presented lessons of life for people in Japan. So he kept the theme of that event that he was writing this book for, which he didn't go to because he didn't have the airfare. The organizer had this international entity, legal entity, and it was the Conference for the Cultivation of Human Spirit. Now, how high-sounding is that? It could mean practically anything. And Prabhupada met somebody in Delhi, because he would go back and forth from Vrindavan. This is 1961. Back and forth from Vrindavan to Delhi, preaching, getting subscribers for his Back to Godhead magazine, and, presenting the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was his order, the order he received from Bhaktisiddhanta to prepare himself for going to the West. While he was living in that little room in Vangsi Gopal Temple, he had begun his translation of Canto 1 Srimad Bhagavatam. So while writing Bhagavatam and preparing his Back to Godhead magazine and getting ready to somehow do Mission Impossible, go to the West and make the world Krishna conscious, one sannyasi. Big assignment. So he got a flyer. The flyer was announcing this event. He wrote to the event organizer saying what his vision was, and his vision was global, from his little room in Vangsi Gopal Temple. And he got a letter back, which was sufficient to get him a visa and a passport, which he didn't have. So he wrote the book. And in the book, the theme, I'm mentioning this word spiritual culture, by the way, that's where the train is going. The theme of the event was cultivation of human spirit, so which can mean anything. So Prabhupada gave it as his definition. He kept using the phrase cultivation of human spirit, cultivation of human spirit, because that was the theme of the event. But then the language started shifting a little bit to spiritual culture, spiritual knowledge, self-realization, and then back again to the cultivation of human spirit. I'm mentioning that because culture, spiritual culture, we can say, Prabhupada was saying, spiritual culture means Bhagavad Dharma. Because Bhagavad Dharma is not just a teaching, it's a way of life. And a way of life is what you might say is culture. And when you just put the adjective spiritual in front of it, you have Bhagavad Dharma, or the light of the Bhagavad. And since the topic that I wanted to present is the Gita values, how do spiritual culture and values connect? So it just so happens, well, I'll mention because of the audience here, a devotee I know got his PhD in so I don't know exactly what it would be called, but organizational development, something. And he showed us in our organization development committee this image that I liked. And so the explanation is whether it's an individual or a family or a group or an organization or a corporation or anything, there's a culture that goes along with it. It's like it's real easy to talk about. Supposing one company buys out another company. And one of the first things they do is they look at the culture of that. The culture of it doesn't mean like what's their dress code and things like that. It's the culture of the organization. So this picture was presented to help, what should be the culture of ISKCON. That was the context, but just to understand the concept. By the way, the colors are really great on the screen. Sometimes they're really crummy, but compliments to Mr. Screen Developer. So you recognize an iceberg, and there's the iceberg of culture, and there's the part of the iceberg that you can see, and there's the part that the people in the Titanic didn't see until it was too late. And that's, what's below the surface of the water. That's the whole iceberg. So with the iceberg of culture, there's the stuff that's up above, and that's measurable, observable, those kinds of things. And language, dress, behaviors, anything that makes up the observable, measurable types of things in human society or a group of people. And that's something to look at. But something that's below the surface of the water that's not so visible, but drives the behaviors and speech and so forth, the observable parts of culture, is the values. So one of the first things any organization does, Prabhupada did it when establishing ISKCON, the 7 purposes of ISKCON. That's what this one is. What we say is important. Official beliefs, mission statements, those kinds of things. That's an expression, written expression of values. And then values drive behaviors. And behaviors can influence and impact, and over a period of time at least, change values. Certainly works that way in our modern society. And then what's at the bottom is things that don't change. Those unchallenged certainties, implicit convictions, deeply held beliefs, like we're spirit soul. There can be different other things up top, but that doesn't change. Values can change and behaviors can change, but that doesn't change. And then the idea of a good organization or good culture of a person or a family or a group or something is there's some alignment. And the Gita values focuses on the values, but it's also resting upon fundamental things. And there's some behaviors and measurable things that go along with it. So that's how values fits in with spiritual culture. And then there's another little message, knowledge, like we find in Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, items of knowledge. But you look at those items of knowledge in chapter 13, even just a quick glance, and it's all about character. That's symptoms of knowledge. So there's a distinction between knowledge and information. There's lots of information in Bhagavad Gita. There's lots of information in the Vedas. But there's the spiritual culture of all those things, and that's when when one lives by that culture, then one has spiritual culture. One becomes a cultured person. I've been preparing a bit. I've been having a great time, by the way, preparing for the winter retreat. Nice warm name, winter retreat. Get in an igloo and turn on the heater or something. Winter retreat. A section from Antya-lila chapter 4, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Several times in that chapter, in different ways, it's brought out about how much Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appreciated Sanatana Goswami for his upholding spiritual culture or standard etiquette and blasting Jagadananda when he felt he was transgressing standard etiquette by a little boy offering advice to someone who's like his guru and Sanatana Goswami. Anyway, a cultured person lives by what their convictions are. And they know that what their convictions should be because they've been trained and they have the right understanding. And they don't just say it, they live by it. And because they live by it, they have realizations of those things that they speak. And that's the power that they carry, their purity. So, which is far more than information. Again, spiritual culture and spiritual knowledge. Prabhupada was using these interchangeably. This is just hindsight because this presentation was developed over a year ago. But when spiritual culture involves knowledge in the transcendental sense, realized knowledge and wisdom. Now, one more thing. All of us have experienced there's a big gap between what we know and where we are, or as they say, where you're at, which is lousy grammar, but here's the image that goes with it. I learned this language from this term from Satchidananda Swami. I liked it, so I kind of adopted it. Because I hadn't, before I mentioned his name, because before, English isn't his first language, but he was using it in his japa retreats. Where we want to go with our chanting. And we're way over here, we want to be way over there. And in between where we are and where we want to go is a big space, a liminal space. There's a big gap. And how to bridge the gap between, let's say, values, Gita values. We know that we have the information what's in Bhagavad Gita. You can train children. It's not wrong to train children to recite Bhagavad Gita slokas, but they don't know what it means. Most children don't know. Ask them if they can recite. I've trained my child. Have him recite some slokas. And then ask them, what does it mean? I don't know. You know any slokas? No? You know the meaning of? Anyway, I won't go there. You get the idea. By the way, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at the age of 6, could recite the entire Bhagavad Gita from memory. And if asked to give an explanation of any of the verses, chapter 7, verse 22, he could speak on that verse for 10 minutes at the age of 6. Not an ordinary jiva, very special jiva. So we're not there. But so liminal space is when hearing these values, Gita values, The preliminary warm up is to say, don't be discouraged if you're not there yet, because we're not there yet either. But it's a direction of where to go. And the good news is Krishna is there to help you cross that liminal space. As long as you reach out and make the Krishna connection along with where you want to go. That's a big part of Krishna's kindness. He gives you the idea of where to go, and then he helps you get there. And without it, it's la la land. It's not a good place to be. So we're ready for Gita value number 2. And since some of you were not with us for Gita value number 1, it's Samadarshana. Sarma, Darshana. Sama, equal. Darshana, to see, equal vision. To seeing others equally. Pandita Samadarshana. Pandita Samadarshana. And from Pandita Samadarshana, where you see the soul, not just the coverings and details of the coverings in culture, the material part of culture, you see the spiritual entity, and you, in an appropriate manner, because this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining. It's a really nice chapter, nice section, about his appreciation of Haridas, and he was fostering it himself. Mahaprabhu was fostering it himself. There's a section where it says, they came, Sanatana Goswami came and stayed with Haridas Thakur shortly before, it was in the month of May, June. No, April, May. And they stayed for Rath Yatra. So when the devotees came from Rath Yatra, personally, Lord Chaitanya introduced each of the devotees to Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami to each of the devotees, and requested each of the devotees to give their blessings to Sanatana Goswami. Like, wow. Personally. That's a lot of devotees. That's a lot of introductions, a lot of blessings. And Sanatana Goswami was to reciprocate with each of them according to their positions, etc., etc., etc. That's culture. That's spiritual culture. It's an important part of spiritual culture, which gets a lot of emphasis in Chaitanya Charitamrita, particularly that section. So, if one is going to live one's life according to Samadarshana, which itself is up there, it's one thing to know, it's another thing to live accordingly. Like we had some nice discussion about acceptance when people misbehave. Harsh. We've all had it. You're on the receiving end, or see someone else is on the receiving end of something that's untoward and hurtful, and etc., etc. Shocking sometimes. Very disturbing. Samadarshana. How are you going to... So, here's from Samadarshana, we discussed that earlier today, comes the second Gita value, Ahimsa. Universal one. Universal one. So, nonviolence, what does it mean? There's what it doesn't mean, and there's what it means. So, some images of wars. Human history shows a record of violence since years ago. Sounds like European language. They speak like that. Since years ago. Violence since years ago. And it continued to the present. And we can have other images of showing present displays of violence. So why? Why does it happen? Mode of ignorance mixed together with the mode of passion, push the plunger, you get violence. How is it related to or not related to equal vision? Now, right away, when you hear the word ahimsa, at least most of us right away think of Buddha, because Buddha taught ahimsa. We all know that from our Hare Krishna literatures. He taught nonviolence, or ahimsa. Nonviolence, one definition can be to act in a way that causes the least harm. That's one. And there's others. Nonviolence means avoiding violence at every level: physical, verbal, what's the other one? Emotional. So that's like negation. Well, we know what Prabhupada says. There's another perspective from Bhagavad Gita. What's that other perspective? Does anybody want to say what the other perspective is? I'll say it for you. You volunteering? You look like you're getting ready to. Okay, there's our Bhagavad Gita. Krishna speaking to Arjuna. This is Prabhupada's from chapter 13, one of the items of knowledge. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually nonviolence means not to put others, oneself also, into distress. Prabhupada's words. That's in the purport. Prabhupada writes, people in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life. This is how it connects with Samadarshana. In the material concept of life, nonviolence means not. And they perpetually suffer material pains because of the bodily conception of life. You know, the image is pretty clear, putting the head in the sand. Here comes something that's unpleasant, just put your head, just look the other way. And that's in the absence of a spiritual conception of self, of others, even the hurtful people or the nice people or the whatever, besides people, living entities. The bodily conception traps us in violence. Many times people don't know what actually benefits them and what is beneficial for human society in general. This is taking a lesson or message from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10. And because of that lack of clarity, of not knowing what's beneficial, they can say, not te vidu. What's the rest? Svartagatim hi Vishnu. You know that one? Not te vidu. Svartagatim hi Prahlad Maharaj, speaking to his dear father. Na te vidu. They do not know. Sva artha gatim. Sva artha gatim. One's own self-interest. Sva artha gatim. He, Vishnu, certainly Vishnu. They don't know that Vishnu. So not knowing what the purpose of life is, it's a problem. It's a problem. People can be really smart, really capable, really this and that and the other thing. But if they don't know what the purpose of life is, it's problematic. Here's an anecdotal. Once upon a time, I was a college kid, a few lifetimes ago. And I had a couple of friends that were grad students, really smart guys. And one of them, close friend, he had a convertible sports car at a time when nobody had convertible sports cars. He had a convertible sports car. And every Saturday, he'd go for a ride. And I asked him, when you're going for a ride, where are you going? He said, I was going for a ride. I was like shocked. I said, I hope you get there. And life is like that for many people. They have little riddles. Row, row, row your boat. You know that one? You from India, you know that one? Gently down the stream. The younger generation, they know these ones, but the older generation, you know this one? Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So where are you going? Life is but a dream. Row, row, row your boat. What's the purpose? Enjoy. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. Party up. So, human form of life is it's advanced on the evolutionary scale, has advanced facilities, but without knowing the purpose, it's problematic. Makes a mess for oneself and for others. Here's the expanded version of Bhagavad Gita 10.4. The human body is meant for spiritual realization. So, any movement or any commissions which do not further that end commit violence on the human body, that which furthers the future spiritual happiness of the people in general, is called nonviolence. That's a nice definition, very, very different than the conventional one. I'm in a sharing mood, so I'm going to share something right now. Just this morning, I don't know how it happened. Oh, I know how it happened. There's a Chinese devotee that lives in the East Coast. Her name is Nandimukhi. She has a PhD, and she's a very smart lady. And she submitted an article to Back to Godhead magazine about Gita values. And it was a really interesting way that she did it. She gave the background of what it is and said it's not just over here. These are universal values. And she's really she's a smart girl. So with each of the 6 values, she summarized what they are, and then gave pictures from Chinese history of different personalities and scenes and situations that taught this value. Of course, nonviolence, it's not only in China, it's not only Buddha, it's standard. But they have the negative, not this one. Not this one. Okay. Because it's transcendental. Transcendental knowledge is not the conventional idea of a value. Spiritual ignorance alienates people. Doesn't lead to samadarshana, it leads to ignorant behavior. It alienates people. It's the foundation for violence at any level, meaning the verbal, physical, emotional. Spiritual ignorance. So what's the non-violence? Bring spiritual knowledge or spiritual culture. That's the ahimsa principle as given to us in Bhagavad Gita, if we read it carefully. Here it is again, 10.4. Ahimsa means that people should be trained in such a way that the full utilization of the human body can be achieved. Okay. You're taking lots of notes. Okay. I don't know how people use their 2 thumbs and they type it faster than I can type with my fingers on a typewriter. Practice? Is that it? I see young people do it, but I haven't seen a gray-haired guy like you do it. Lots of practice. Okay. Pardon me. It's one of those evenings. What can you do? Chicago, stormy weather. Okay. You recognize this gentleman, Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. I don't know if you've seen images of his or videos of him doing his thing. You see he has puppets on his hand, and there's a giraffe on one hand, and there's the jackal on the other hand. And he says, your jackal speak is like this. Then I heard him, watched a little bit of his videos. That why a giraffe? Because compared to the size of the body of a giraffe, their heart is really big. So that's why it's a giraffe. And then there's the giraffe speak. So he role models, this is violent communication, this is nonviolent communication. And it doesn't really take it to the spiritual conception. It's still, because he was a Buddhist. He didn't teach Buddhism, but that was where he was coming from. And Bir Krishna Maharaj has very kindly taken, he studied, he went to his seminars, very expensive things, and learned the principles, and then Krishnaized it. And it's now being taught in a nice way. Sri Radhika's going around teaching this, the spiritual perspective on nonviolent communication. So it's not uncommon. People have certainly heard of, they've got its acronym, NVC, nonviolent communication. So here's, maybe we can do it. This is a breakout session. The breakout session means you guys talk and I stop talking. So think of a situation in your life where you felt non-acceptance of yourself or of others. How did you or they react? It says write it down, but you don't have to write it down. You can talk about it. What were your feelings? For example, some negative emotions. And then next, what did you need at that time? This underline the word need because it's a big part of Marshall Rosenberg's teachings, which Bir Krishna Maharaj has incorporated. An unfulfilled need. We have needs. The bottom is you have to eat and so forth. And you go up and there's higher needs. So what was your need when you felt not accepted? Or you weren't accepting of someone? And what was the need that wasn't being met? Behind any negative emotion, there's an unmet need. This is part of the premise. So, what need was unmet when you felt the negative emotion in that situation? Now, for us, it's up here, and if you get Krishna realization, your needs are met because there's an alignment. And if you don't get Krishna realization, you may meet some of these other ones, but this one isn't met, so you're feeling not fulfilled. Okay, so this is like an exercise. Let's keep going and see what happens. Here's somebody that's in their head, the mind. Now, close your eyes, look at yourself as a bird that's sitting in a cage, trying to get all your needs met by others. How does it feel? Confining, right? Disempowering. You get the picture? No, it's if you see down here, it says discussion. So let's do that. We had this nice experience. For me, it was a nice learning experience. With this Light of the Bhagavad, we had 3 breakout sessions, and everyone got to discuss what we had understood and how to apply it, and those kinds of nice open-ended questions. And it was really helpful. People shared afterwards. So let's do this. You get the picture. Should we go back and say it again, or I don't need to go back? I don't need to go back. When you didn't feel accepted, you weren't accepting of someone. What did it feel like? What was the need that was not met? And now you're in a cage. You're a bird in a cage, and your needs are to be met by others outside the cage. How does it feel? And the idea is you're meant to recognize what your needs are, and as far as possible, meet your needs within reason. Have a strategy to meet your needs. That's like an essence of this nonviolent communication. Because if you're in a position of neediness, you can say things that are sharp, or not very thoughtful. You feel sorry about it later, or maybe not feel sorry about it later. So let's do this. Somebody that's in your little vicinity, 2 people, 3 people, try to maximize it at 4 people. We'll spin out for 7, 8 minutes, because we're going to do another one. What's it like when you feel not trapped, not looking for your needs to be met by others? That's what we're going to do next. Get comfortable. Find somebody you want to communicate with, or a few somebodies. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. What's the rest? Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, you look like you're having a really good time. So we're going to do another one right after this. The difference between feeling disempowered and feeling empowered. But I'll give you a hint. Say it negatively, then say it positively. Without a spiritual conception, you're going to feel disempowered. Because the bodily conception that's the cage. That's the trap. Because in that bird in the cage situation, I've got my needs, and there's the situation and others that are meant to meet my needs. And they're responsible, the situation and others, to meet my needs. Really disempowering. And it doesn't feel good. So now let's go the other direction. Hey, look at that. The bird cage is open. Close your eyes again. Go back to that situation. Look at yourself and others in that situation as spirit souls. Samadarshana. The body that you and others are in, the resultant emotions, everyone's needs, their coverings. And from Bhagavad Gita, we learn the field of activities and its interactions. Some of you like reading Prabhupada's books, and you know what those two verses are. The 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, it lists the 24, and then it lists the interactions of those 24s, desire and hate, happiness, distress, aggregate life symptoms, convictions, field of activities and their interactions, all of those. And that's not what happiness is. It's not what freedom is. Now, we just meditated on being free. See how your vision of yourself, others, and the situation changed from non-acceptance to acceptance. Situation is what the situation is. And you have needs, and that doesn't have to change. You have to delete some because if they're actually needs. If they're not really needs, then you can put them in another category. But then, with respect and the mood of service to Krishna, you move through life. Look at meeting your needs from this sacred space where expectations and frustrations are replaced with a mood of respect and service. This is remember the context for this Gita values was, how is somebody that's going to be a leader of a global organization, or just even, in your little group of people, where people have different needs, different personalities, perhaps different social backgrounds, different. And you got to, navigate. In a mood of respect and service, respecting differences, knowing that they have their set of needs. They may be projecting you're meant to meet their need, and if you don't, there's something going on inside them saying rah, rah, rah. And maybe vice versa. And there's a lot of that goes on. So now what's the liberation from that unpleasantry? And then how do you act and behave? That's the iceberg. That's the speed and the measurable things. And then this is the value. Okay. Full realization of our spiritual nature is to become connected to the real us. And, this is the language of these authors, that divine nature. I think they use the word divine nature because the God word in some circles is like a no-no, turns people off. Divine nature. Cultivation of the human spirit. Once connected that way, this is the Pandita Samadarshana, same as this midday session. Non-violence to self and family. They're going to go concentric circles out from there. So there's people around you and your family, and there's community and society, and then there's the broader circle, nation, humanity, and then other species of life, and you just keep going. But at the center is a spiritual conception. Now, I didn't prepare for this, so we're going to skip it, but there's a role play. And everybody laughs at the role play because it's fun. It's the model of the trapped and the model of the liberated person. And the communication and the exchanges are very, very different. And the sense of fulfillment is very, very different. So we're meant to be leaders. And Prabhupada was training us. I mean, he had rough characters to train, but he was training us to become brahmanas, become learned in the scripture, and then to act according to what scripture says, and to be in thus, in this way, be leaders in society. At least, leaders in the sense of being exemplars of this is what Bhagavad Gita says. I live my life according to what Bhagavad Gita says. I don't have to be a big rah-rah person, but just be an exemplary person. And that's what Prabhupada wanted for us, of us, and for us. Because then there can be at least examples in the world of what self-realization is, or what a life of living in harmony that's directed towards this goal, this higher goal. Cultivation of the human spirit, or spiritual culture, or spiritual knowledge, or Gita values. Different terms can be used. But specific to nonviolence, it's that which is going to awaken that spiritual culture of others, and it can just be as simple as how you conduct yourself. There's the good conduct and the opposite of good conduct. Something that I'm very conscious of, I'll just share this with you. When I travel, I dress like this. It has its advantages and disadvantages. I'll share one advantage with you. It's a secret, but I'll tell you. In Southwest Airlines, they don't assign seats. So I like sitting on the aisle seat, and if there's any empty space, it's going to be the seat next to me. There's exceptions, but that's commonly what happens. That's one of the advantages. Here's another one. Yesterday, the flight left Portland 20 minutes late. It arrived a half an hour after the departure time said we would arrive. And when we reached Chicago, the pilot stopped the plane and said, the good news is our gate is open. The bad news is there's a plane getting de-iced in between us and the gate. So we're stuck here. But I'll let you know. And then, okay, they're halfway done. But it has the good news. The other bad news is there's other vehicles in the way. And so we're sitting on, and there are people, because there's most of the people in our flight were making a connecting flight. And they're like anxiety, and they're walking around with cold towels, keeping people cool. Finally, we got at the gate, and that, what do you call that thing? They let you off the plane. What's that thing called? The vestibule? No. What's the thing? Jet bridge. No, there's nobody there at the jet bridge. So anyway, people that are finally get off the plane, went to baggage claim belt number 5, and waited for a half an hour. Somebody came along. This is one of the advantages of, said, you were on our flight, and you probably didn't hear, but they changed it from belt 5 to belt 4. And if I wasn't dressed this way, I might still be standing there. So there's advantages. But I'm very, very well aware that I'm representing all of you. You may not know that, but I know that, because if I misbehave, or if I show proper behavior, courtesy, and all those nice things, it says it has makes an impression just by being of good character, of proper speech, proper conduct, polite. It's on all the things that you should do, the external things that a person of good character will do. And sometimes it invites people asking the curiosity kind of questions. They're not really want to know. They're just like, I'm curious. You monk? You Buddhist monk? And I say, no, I'm a Krishna monk. Oh, what's a Krishna monk? And then I get to tell them something about Krishna. So there's advantages. But we are meant by our founder Acharya to be representatives of Krishna in this world, and with proper understanding of what the scripture says, and live accordingly in all spheres. So you're in your workplace, you're in school, you're in the marketplace, shopping, you're doing whatever you're doing. Besides the consciousness that I'm doing this for Krishna, you're having an impact, good or not so good. And where there's purity, the more that there's purity, the more there's a positive impact. So back to this nonviolence, carry the consciousness of persons have a misconception of who they are. Prabhupada lived this way, and how to elevate people to a spiritual conception of who they are. You can do all the other things that people expect non-violent person to do or to be, but in your heart of hearts, you're wishing for the opportunity to elevate them to a spiritual conception. Somehow. It can be, however small, but something. And then those somethings accumulate over time. And next thing you know, it's like how many people, you've all heard it, how they became devotees. They were like allergic to anything to do with God. It's just like, keep away. But somehow, something by good association, somehow, so slowly. Now, some people aren't like that, but some people are like that. And good being of good character, you're carrying that desire in your heart to help people become aware of who they really are. And that's an act of nonviolence that follows Samadarshana. And then you can be Krishna's instrument, according to your purity. And Krishna can and does orchestrate circumstances that facilitate that desire. So that's our ahimsa topic. Gita values number 2, that flows from the Samadarshana topic. It's you're not the body and you're not the body. Now, how do you live that way? It's nonviolence. What is nonviolence? Not just don't hurt people or minimize the pain and inconvenience other people experience because you exist. That's easy. But then go further. How can you live your life in such a way and interact with people, even, whatever the circumstances, that help further that they become happy? And it requires eventually, at least, becoming relieved of the bodily conception. And different persons are going to respond differently. But little drops over a period of time can lead to some accumulation of some sukriti, spiritual sukriti. That was a preaching message in case you didn't get it. But that's what we do. We receive and we give. Any discussion? Gita values number 2, ahimsa. Ahimsa. Yes.
A small clarification. So this ahimsa looks to be the byproduct of samadarshana, like rather than the value 2. It looks like
A byproduct. That's a nice way of looking at it. It's certainly they're brothers. They have the same mother. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, thank you. This is a very interesting, very helpful. I was curious, the definition that we saw from the Gita about nonviolence, that nonviolence is acting in such a way that we don't incur pain, inflict pain on others. That seems like a consequentialist definition of nonviolence, that we do whatever does not give pain on others.
Yeah, that's a negative one.
Yes. So that's hard to judge at times, because it's, the other view is that no matter what, you're nonviolent. So like some Christians believe against the capital punishment because you just simply shouldn't kill. It's the principle of God. It's the law of God. And in our scriptures also we find often definitions like that, that this is a principle that's always to be followed. If we think in this way, then it's sometimes we say, oh, this will not bring pain to others, but we do give pain, or we give pain to someone else by not giving pain to this person. So how do we, how can we actually judge the consequence when we're very
have
limited?
Intelligence, otherwise you can't. And intelligence comes from, you know who? Super soul. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Tesham satati yuktanam. So it's not the going, it's not black and white. And in that gray area, as we know from Mahabharata, it's not easy to decide. How do you discern? It's not easy to decide. And therefore, the light by which we look at situations is Mahajanas. And that how well are we connected with Mahajanas? Even if we're well connected with Mahajanas, it still can be confusing. It's not easy. But it's reliance upon our Krishna connection and becoming knowledgeable in the scripture. And we're not always going to get it right. And when we don't get it right, we acknowledge it. And it's in many cases, since it's done, it's too late. It's done. So you can go and say, "Gee, I'm sorry." And that's something we should do, but learn from the mistakes. Anyway, it's not easy. It's not black and white. Sometimes in life, there are multiple choices that are less than ideal, and but they're satisfactory because A and B. The intention is that Krishna should be pleased, and B, if we have our receiver on, if Krishna gives us a single signal, this wasn't the right decision. Excuse me, but it wasn't the right decision. You're more than willing to withdraw that not right decision and recalibrate and adjust. So the Krishna connection with Super Soul is very important in evaluating. Becoming conversant in what Scripture says is very important in making the right discernment as to what is to be done in different situations. And we're not always going to come up with some scriptural reference that tells us this is the thing to do in this situation. So we have to rely upon a relationship with Krishna, and that he'll tap us on the shoulder and say, excuse me, you didn't make the right decision. And then we adjust. And for the not right decisions, we take responsibility. And responsibility is more than just saying, "Gee, I'm sorry." It's whatever is required, because the circumstance, etc., was bewildering enough. I didn't have a clear idea, and I had to do something. So it's not black and white. as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, sharing with the Kunda, Burijan Prabhu covered this topic during his talk. And very interesting. It's just like we can make some statements that are really simple, like chant Hare Krishna and become sublime, or go back to Godhead. And then there's some further details besides chant Hare Krishna and go back to Godhead. There's subtleties, and it takes refinement.
As a follow-up to that, Maharaj, so are there any values that a devotee believes are absolute values? Like, see, some people believe you should never lie. And Krishna's ethics seems always consequentialist, like
Yes.
in the Mahabharata and things. But do we have any values that we would say, no matter what,
If Krishna gives if you get a direct instruction from Krishna something, you do that. The three examples that Prabhupada would refer to again and again and again, don't kill, but he's instructing Arjuna to kill. Don't lie. He's instructing Yudhishthira to lie. And, young women, young men in the dead of night going off and enjoying together. That's a no-no. But Krishna wanted, and the gopis wanted what Krishna wanted. They not only wanted what they wanted what Krishna wanted. And so it's transcendental. So the invariable and unchangeable thing is what Krishna wants. Now, how are you going to know what Krishna wants? Because the next, if you get a direct instruction, you got it. And there are some general instructions, and those are the guideposts that we go for what Krishna wants. Here's a Prabhupada story. During a period of time, Srila Prabhupada, the temple president in Chicago, when I was living at the Brooklyn Temple and Prabhupada was visiting at the Brooklyn Temple, the temple president in Chicago was Sri Govinda. Sri Govinda was kind of a character, and he came he got a permission to speak with Prabhupada directly. I can't remember how it was that I was there, but I was there. And he had a complaint and a request. First came the request. He wanted Prabhupada to come and take part in a major event that he wanted to organize and widely broadcast. It'll be a big audience. And Prabhupada's response set Sri Govinda back. He said, I can come if you charge money. And Sri Govinda said, but I thought, speakers don't require money for speaking because they just give the message of Krishna consciousness freely. Now, I don't know what the background was or anything. I do know what Prabhupada said. He said, in your country, if people get something free, they don't value it so much. For that reason, I want them to pay. Not because I want the money. I want them to value hearing. It was like he digested that one, a little bumpy to digest that one. But then the next one was he had a complaint. And his complaint was that in Los Angeles, there are some devotees that are going around with Apple buttons because Apple Records, they had a logo. It was a green apple and some peel from the apple coming off. And they didn't say Apple Records, it just had their logo, which is probably illegal, I don't know. But, and they're saying, this is, I forget what the line was, but they were using in Los Angeles as saying, something about George Harrison's name and wearing their logo, Apple record logo. He said, I don't think this is right. And Prabhupada didn't agree with him. it was morality. It was questioning morality, and said, salespeople may say so many things. It's quite okay. And then he asked the question: in your country, is it illegal? And he said, no, but I think it's misleading. I said, oh. It wasn't endorsing mislead people so he can sell books. But it was, it's an ethical question, and there's a higher purpose, and the higher purpose was to distribute the book. And if they want to distribute a book that way, not like everyone should now line up and start doing that. But their intention was increase the distribution of Prabhupada's books in a non-illegal way, and it's harmless. They weren't saying the books are from Apple Records. They were just having a record of the logo and saying George Harrison's name, as far as I can recall in the discussion. And that was his objection, because it's misleading. No, the next person in the room, he might have said the opposite. So you can't, one anecdotal event doesn't set a standard for the whole society or our founder Acharya. It could very well just be a relationship with that person or something. But it's because I was in the room, I'm sharing it with you. What would please our founder Acharya? Or what would please your spiritual master in conducting your life within society? And that's a very important question to ask yourself. And there's other senior devotees. You don't have the answer to that. You can ask other senior devotees what to do in this circumstance, etc., etc. So the answer is what's pleasing to Guru and Krishna. That's invariable. And for one person this is, and another person that is, and that's perfectly okay. There's varieties even in what's pleasing to Guru and Krishna. Yes. He's got a little microphone. It's really small, but it does work. Here it is.
So this is from Bhagavad Gita 10.4. The human body is meant for spiritual realization. So any movement or any commissions which do not further that end commit violence in the human body. So I guess I'm a little stuck with that last part of that. Commit violence in the human body.
Why?
I was
you
almost
stuck?
expecting that you would say commit violence to the spirit still living in the human body. So I don't understand.
Oh, it's the same.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is. Because it's violence to the human body because the spirit soul isn't fulfilling the purpose of the human body. So it's violence to the human body, which is violence to the soul that's within the human body.
Okay.
I mean, you can go to Prabhupada and ask if you can make that editorial change, but I don't feel there's a problem because one implies the other.
I see. Okay.
Over here longer in the front, then we're going to go in the back after. Here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was just trying to think how to phrase this, but I was just thinking about the iceberg and the topic of culture and the different levels of culture, good culture, and just thinking about these values as a whole. If we see devotees, especially who have been in, at least externally in good standing for a long time, and then some values are broken in a very, very serious way, I feel like you've of course been around for so long and have seen everything under the sun. And
at night too.
yes. Yeah. And I guess the kind of reactions that I've tended to see amongst devotees is either devotees leave from things like this, they see things like this and they leave because their faith is broken in some way, or they kind of overlook it and it's almost like a denial kind of what really happened. And I was wondering if you could just comment on like, what is a healthy way to respond to protect our faith when we see like serious transgressions of these principles?
Let me compliment you for the sweet way that you asked this very difficult question. And Rishta was with us in Portland, and there was a young person who you know, I won't mention his name. He didn't ask it so nicely. You know, he shared later that he's like he feels himself the protector of the victims. You know, then he went on to the next question. It was basically the same thing. So thank you for the delicate way of presenting a delicate question. Well, there's different gradations of response, and one is to be very clear about the difference between the covering of the soul and the soul, or the behavior that may be reprehensible, and the soul that's not. So your specific question is the impact that may have on people whose faith is weak. It may break their weak faith, or may damage their faith so it makes it difficult for them to move forward, etc. Here's a few thoughts. One, I remember personally hearing Prabhupada say, don't be surprised when people go away, be surprised when people stay. Meaning, they're a hero to face the onslaught of the material energy, and they're still standing after some period of time without too many war marks on their body. That they've withstood the test of time, and that's that speaks something about their good character. Not to be surprised when someone does whatever it is that they do that's very wonderful, 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 and then they slip. It's not to, so it happens. So it doesn't make it necessarily for those that have weak faith. Those that have strong faith, it's more digestible than for those whose faith is not very strong. So one of the things to do is to be a good example. One of the things that you and I and anyone can do is consistently be a good example and not be judgmental of the person who went away, or be judgmental of the person who feels their faith is damaged. But to be a good example. So to be a beacon of light, or be a place of, here's some place where I can repose my faith. Just being circling back to what I said, what Prabhupada wanted us to be in the world. And depending upon the person, there's this nice example in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in this Antilila chapter 4, where Lord Chaitanya says, there's a nice term, I can't remember the Sanskrit term or Bengali term. They're glorious, Danya, is that it? They're glorious if they never leave their faithful Lord and Master. He's speaking about Murari Gupta and his faithfulness, and Anupam and his faithfulness to serve Lord Ramachandra. When even they were tested, they remained faithful. And then he turned it around and said, and glorious is that master, even if their follower goes away, they find them. And if necessary, by their hair, they bring them back. No, it's not so nice to grab somebody by the hair, but extend. So the person who has that, their faith has been damaged, continue to be friendly, and but be a person of, just extend without like carrying them, but just wishing to, same principle as we've been speaking, to strengthen their spiritual culture, because within is something. That's how they came to the position of having some faith that then got damaged by somebody that did something goofy or worse, bad or worse. As this devotee was saying, unspeakable. It's like his face was red. I said, boy, your face. I said, your face is red. You're really invested in this topic. It was, his voice was calm, but he was feeling something really hurt. So continue to be kind to that person. When damage is done, it's hard to repair damage. So what do you do when damage is done and it's hard to repair? You just continue to be an exemplary person that's kind, and show, not just in terms of your behavior with that person, but your behavior in general, your conduct in general. So that can nurture their faith, at least to some degree. And if depending upon the relationship. And you never give up. 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 And they may never come back, but you never give up. Remain their well-wisher, and generally speaking, there's multiple factors besides the one that you mentioned involved in someone's departing. It's an obvious factor, but it's not. My comment is it's not the only factor. There's something else going on within that person. And it's really nice when somebody comes back. Well, I'm thinking of some examples, but I won't go into it. And it's nice when people come back. And even if they don't, you just continue being their well-wisher and continue being a good example and encourage them in whatever way you can. Someone else in the way in the back, Krishna? Is this better than a portable microphone? Huh? Oh. It broke. Send it to a doctor? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, this is just a comment on when you said that as devotees, sometimes we use terms like back to Godhead or stuff in a very vague way. And this was 2 nights ago when we were in Portland. And it was my first time there too. So I was surprised that the breakout session I was facilitating, they very openly shared that they really never, one of them, they were like sort of younger, they said, I never understood what back to Godhead meant. And I was like, I felt really honored that they shared that with me because, I was using that a lot in the breakout session. So they said, can you please explain to me what this exactly means other than, we want to go back to Godhead. And, we explained to them later that, it means you don't have to take birth again in this like cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And then they said, hey, that makes sense because now I get why we don't want to, take a life again in this world. And that was just my reflection on what you mentioned in the lecture.
There's lots of things to say about back to Godhead in addition. But if that she was a facilitator for youth. And there's some of them were like really little youth, as well as older ones. So giving response that's appropriate for the person is an art. So that was a good answer for that person. There are other answers that are more appropriate for different audiences. Poetry is fantastic. I'm expressing this because in this light of the Bhagavad, the whole thing is poetry. I mean, it's scenes of nature, and Prabhupada is so similarly, and you're way over here talking about life. So one of the examples was the difference between rainfall and waterfalls. I never thought about what's the difference between rainfall. It's like water and water. Water falls on the mountain, it comes down, and there's waterfalls. But he was making this distinction that waterfalls is like an acharya that will deliver sometimes and sometimes not. I was thinking, wait a minute, waterfalls deliver. But we were staying at the home of a family that's from way up in the North Country, and she said, no. When glaciers melt, there's lots of water. Sometimes the glaciers don't melt and the waterfalls don't flow. So it was Prabhupada's metaphor to say an indiscriminate person will just give sprinklings of water. They're not even knowing what they're doing. But an acharya is one who is very clear about the audience, what's appropriate, and they'll speak or they'll not speak according to the audience. So that's an important responsibility for each of us. I mean, it's kind of a common sense, but it takes some refinement to know what to speak and then, be sensitive to how's it being received. I mean, it's like your question, and this other fellow was asking this question, and his face was red. My response to him and my response to you is a little different. I mean, the principle doesn't change, but how to customize, it's kind of common sense, just being a sociable person, but it's a responsibility. When you're going to represent transcendence, you're going to represent the personality of Godhead and our teachers. The ahimsa principle is a guiding light. Anyone else? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. Guru Maharaj, it was such a wonderful topic that you are talking on, ahimsa. About 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago in Bangladesh, there was an attack on the ISKCON temple.
Yes.
A lot of violence has happened then and even now. We all got together, we protested for a day. After that, I just forgot about it and moved on. So now, the violence is going on there, and does it mean that I am part of that violence because I'm not doing anything about it?
You're not Ishvara. The part that you can do is you be the example of 10.4 Bhagavad Gita. That's your part. You're not a firefighter. You're in a chart. You be a good example, and that's, by the way, one of the Gita values coming up. Stay tuned. So that's what you can do. Combat the tendency. It's collective. It's like Ukraine, or etc.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
I see a hand up way in the back. You're going to come forward. That's nice of you.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Not causing hurt or distress to others.
That's the negative.
Yeah, we have seen 3 categories. I'm thinking of the emotional distress part. I'm also trying to connect to the needs, Guru Maharaj. Hopefully, I'll be able to phrase out my question properly. So sometimes, even though our intention is proper, but the way the others perceive and the hurt that's caused to them is totally disproportional.
Welcome to life.
So I'm thinking it could also be some unmet needs from their own end, which could be causing that kind of a reaction or behavior.
Yes.
So in that situation, as a devotee, I know we have to take the humble position and accept our part. But on the other hand, do we also say they also have some part or responsibility?
You don't carry that. That's up to them.
Because then the response could be different, right?
But you can't control that. It's up to them. They're making choices as you're making choices. You have your needs as they have their needs. Don't make your needs fulfilling their needs. They should not make your fulfilling their needs their need. And he's using this language that's in this section. But, you can't carry the burden of others. You know that one, right?
So in that situation, we just go humbly apologize and be okay with them not being okay with us at that moment. Or
At that moment, yeah. But it's back to my response to Mukunda's question. Over a period of time, continue to be of exemplary as best you can. Be of exemplary character and conduct and speech. And then they're going to make whatever they're going to make out of that. And your apology, and but you're not super soul. You go forward. You may want to go back again. You may want to go back again after that. So the expression is accepted as something that's genuine. But you don't own that feeling. They do. It's not cold. They have their relationship with Krishna. They have the baggage they're carrying. They have their needs and they have their stuff. And you wish them well. But your business is not to fix their stuff. Okay? I think we should end. Shivalabha, where are you? You got a big house. This is a good place for Saturday night gatherings because you got a big house. You got a big heart. You got a couple nice grandchildren too. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.